Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I'm delighted to have back on the podcast TED Talk internet sensation, host of the Coaching Code podcast, ubiquitous internet personality, recently hosted brilliant global virtual coaching summit called Go Chase Excellence. Reed Maltbie, welcome back.
Stuart, it's so awesome to be back with you. And I know everybody says that at the beginning of a podcast, but for me, this has real special meaning because you were the first ever podcast that I did back in 2015. And it's so great to circle back and see how much success you've had over the years.
Well, I remember. We've just been. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier on. It's interesting, isn't it? How, we basically are sort of in similar sort of time, parallel sort of like a kind of universe. I remember seeing you do your TED Talk, and I'm just thinking, whoa, that's such a brilliant message. I've got to reach out to this guy. I've got to get him on because I'd only just started this podcasting journey, as you know. I mean, and, those early days as well, we had all sorts of Skype issues and all sorts of things going on. So, it's kind of nice to sort of almost circle back after, I don't know, I'm getting on towards 100 episodes now and have another conversation because things have moved on in a big way.
They have. I've really enjoyed seeing you were brilliant, from the start, and you were already very accomplished in what you were doing. But to see the podcast, what you're doing, grow with the Talent Equation, and to see the kind of guests you're getting and the feedback, and just like you said, it's that learning environment that you've created, and it's almost like a lab for people to test out new theories and drive new knowledge, and it's really fascinating to see it, Stuart. I'm excited for you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because it certainly hasn't felt like I was accomplished. I've certainly felt like I've been on a learning journey, shall we say. And in many ways, that's been one of the fascinating things about this whole podcasting journey, I suppose, is originally the plan was I really like talking to people about coaching, and I'd like to talk to more people who coach to find out kind of like a bit more about what makes them tick and get a real sense of what that's all about. So it's kind of selfishly like a little bit of personal CPD. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I try and record these conversations so that other people can hear them as well? And then lo and behold, people like it and they're finding the conversations valuable. And so then, things snowball and here we go. And then you have to start doing it properly and doing proper editing and getting it all properly published and all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I do appreciate it. And actually the way you describe it almost like a lab, it definitely is that because, you can probably hear sometimes that, we're thinking aloud, we're thinking through problems together. And in fact, that's one of the things I love is that kind of almost that co-creation piece.
I'm with you. I'm completely with you. And like you said, it's a learning journey. The guru myth has to be sort of destroyed a little bit. And none of us are truly gurus. We're learning from each other and we're growing. And to be able to get to people that are experts in a field and start to have a conversation around it and share, and then like you said, dive into it and sort of just like manipulate it verbally and go through the theory is what makes your podcast so exciting because we're not coming on with canned responses. We're having a conversation and then we're starting to play what if scenarios and what next type of scenarios with what we're talking about.
And everything we do as well is like we talked about it a lot. It's super complex. It's changing all the time. Just at the second you think you've got it, it's just out of your reach, and that's probably part of the reason we're also addicted to it, because we always know there's something new to learn, there's something new to be engaged by, there's a different challenge around the corner. But I mean, one thing I wanted to just talk to you about a little bit, I'll kind of kick off the conversation is, last 2 years, it's been you've been doing all sorts of things. You've had some fantastic projects on the go. You've been like super busy. Just talk me through this kind of last couple of years and everything that's been going on in your world.
Well, so you saw the pictures. You've seen them before, the pictures of dignitaries that when they go into office, they look like one thing. And then after 4 years in office, it shows that they've aged 100 years. That's how I feel. The last 2 years have just zoomed by, but at the same time, so much has happened. So what I'm doing now, you mentioned it, was the Go Chase Excellence think tank. Got together with Gordon McClellan from Working with Parents in Sport, Sam Snow from American Made Soccer Consultants and formerly of U.S. Youth Soccer, and Ruth Nicholson of Go On Demand Governance and Operations Support for youth sports organizations. And the four of us created this think tank where we brought in 60 some of what we felt were some of the world's experts in their particular fields. And we did anywhere between 15-minute to hour-long presentations with them where they talked about a specific topic in an area, and then they gave solutions to it. And we didn't expect the response we got. We ended up hitting on 5 continents. We ended up you were one of the experts. We ended up getting some phenomenal experts like you on board who brought new ideas and new theories to the table and then gave real-world solutions. And so that's one. That was really exciting. The other thing I've been working on is I've really moved into this idea of developing those leaders who transform lives of children. So more in the personal coach development realm. And so I'm working with U.S. Sailing and Soccer Shops are my first 2 major clients to do it with me. I'm rolling out, Ontario Volleyball's coming on board too. I'm rolling out some coach development where I'm doing one-on-one mentoring. And basically I become that person's personal mentor professor. So whatever areas of coaching competencies that they want to learn about, I'll structure a learning environment for them with courses and books to read and access to resources, because I've partnered with Player Development Program and Working with Parents in Sport and Go On Demand. So when they whatever they need in their own activity plan to become a better coach, I'll be able to give them those resources. And then we'll talk almost daily of accountability and ownership. What did you do today? What are you working on today? Send me a picture of your lesson plan. Let's talk about what problems are you having, and I'll mentor them. And then they'll also drop into a mastermind with larger groups. And I'm layering in video analysis because I did some of that with Ontario Volleyball, and it was hugely successful because I'm stepping away from the science of coaching, the technical piece, and talking about the other pieces: communication skills, interaction with the athletes, body language, facial expressions, positioning, all of that stuff. And so that's the second one that I've been doing, and that's keeping me busy enough. And then the third thing was Positive Discipline Tools for Coaches. Jane Nelson of Positive Discipline approached me a couple of years back. Took us a few years, but we created a deck of tool cards that help coaches set that learning environment for athletes. So it's all about creating proper learning cues and communication capability, contribution, conflict strategies for coaches. So in other words, you can't have a successful training session if the behaviors in your session are disruptive. And so it's how do we create this relationship with these kids that's not a punishment, not a reward type of situation, but developing relationships with them so that they're excited to be in that learning environment and they feel like they're competent and capable and they belong there. And so they're obviously more effective. And so it's just basically taking what she did in the parent space and classroom space, which has been hugely successful for the past 4 decades, and put it into coaching. We put out the tool cards, and now I'm in talks with places like Brazil and China and Spain about potentially, the cards are being translated into languages in those countries, but also about potentially traveling there and doing these 2 and 3 day workshops around them, where we do a lot of really cool, interactive, hands-on workshops based on the Educare model that, the knowledge is in the coaches. My job is to facilitate drawing it out of them, because the root word for education is Educare, to draw forth. And so those are the 3 biggest things that are happening right now.
Like I said, a lot going on, and also one of the things that I couldn't quite work out. I figured you just got too busy. Was the coaching code? I was looking forward to that every week, and it kind of stopped. And I thought, maybe he's just kind of getting a bit busy, and maybe one will come along. And then Next thing I know, it turns out, having spoken to you, that you lost it all and now you've had to relaunch it all. So Coaching Code's back on the agenda. Is that correct?
It is. And so when you do a recap after a game and there are certain things that you say, wow, I blew it there, and I need to make sure in the future I don't do that. That was Coaching Code for me. I put it on the back burner to focus on some other projects, some other podcasts I was producing, and some other things that were going on that I didn't think it had the traction with people. And not that traction mattered, because I was doing it more for just the art of it. But I just, it was one of those, okay, so if this isn't getting traction, this isn't helping people, let me back burner for a bit. And then it just stayed back burner. And then I migrated websites and lost everything. And that's really, like you said, that's when I was really surprised by the people who reached out and said, where the heck is Coaching Code? I miss it. Or Reed, what are you doing? And I didn't realize that I had that kind of reach and listenership, and that it was resonating with people, because I was just, you heard them. I just get on there and I'd pick a topic and I'd dive deep into the science, and then I just ramble like a crazy man about whatever that topic was. And I didn't realize people were really digging that. So I revamped it or relaunched it this past week. 11 of the 18 of the initial episodes are already back up. I lost one completely. Mark Bennett's episode is in the ether. I cannot find it. I think I have the raw data, so I'll have to republish it, but it gives me an excuse to reach out to Mark and have him on again.
Yeah.
But I'm reformatting it just slightly. I've got some cool stuff coming that it'll be a little bit different. So I'm excited to bring it back.
Awesome. It's good to know that it's back on the radar, because like I said, maybe it's just me because I'm a geek, but I kind of used to love the rants. I used to love you just going off on one about the science and then exploring where it took us and all those sorts of things. It was good fun, and the one we did was equally good fun. So I mean, like I said, so much happening. I don't know where to start, but let me just jump into the mentoring bit, because I think it's really a fascinating area for me, and it's a particular area of interest because I'm doing a fair amount of that myself. And again, that's another learning journey. And of course, making some mistakes or a lot of mistakes and kind of guiding people who are themselves on a learning journey and placing yourselves alongside them is quite a challenge, because you find yourself in some places that you probably wouldn't expect to be, and dealing with some issues and some things that you probably wouldn't have expected to deal with. So just tell me about your experiences so far, and let's just see what whether there's any commonality.
Sure. Well, it's been all over the board, because it's dependent on what organizations want. New soccer shots, I'm doing a lot of. I rolled out the tool cards, but then we did custom branded ones, and then I trained their operating team, and then it's working with the individual franchises and tweaking the curriculum. And so I'm mentoring at advisor level to the franchise itself. But U.S. Sailing is in Ontario Volleyball will be cool, because U.S. Sailing, they're giving me, we're working with 25 of their high performance quote unquote coaches, and they're stamping out these high performance centers across the country, 5 of them. And so we're working from the top down. And Ontario Volleyball, he wants to do the opposite. It's going to be more grassroots. We're going to work from the bottom up. And so as I start to design this, I realized that one, it doesn't matter whether you're a quote unquote high performance coach or you're a grassroots coach. A lot of times your needs are the same. And a lot of times your hindsight is similar. I wish I'd known this. I wish I'd had more experience with this. I wish I had access to this. And so it doesn't matter. That level doesn't matter. Coaching is coaching. And there are some pieces of the puzzle that everybody really wants and relishes. The other piece of that puzzle is seeing it across sports. I rolled out a couple of workshops last year with various sports and various levels. So golf, soccer, volleyball, skiing, snow sports. So skiing, aerial skiing, cross-country skiing, that group, and sailing. And when I did it, what was really cool is I collected the data from the workshops when I was mentoring these coaches. And what I found was that it didn't matter the level of the coach, but it also didn't matter the sport. They were seeing similar coaching blockage issues. Like, we're not professional enough because of X, or I feel like I'm not growing as a coach because of X, or I don't feel like I have a real grasp of the knowledge in this area. And those particular items became the same. And they also, how they worked with their athletes, had very similar issues. These are the issues and challenges I see with my athletes. These are the solutions I bring to the table, or these are the things that I do to make my athletes feel like they belong, like they're capable, like they have significance, and like they have, like they own this. And so it was really cool to see how things are similar, and then to share with each of the different groups. Oh, and lacrosse was the other group that I worked with. So all these different sports, and I'm seeing all these similarities, that mentoring is mentoring at its base level, and coaching is coaching at its base level. And then it's basically creating that universally defined learning journey for those coaches. And then it becomes specifically refined based on their level in sport they coach.
Now, I want to touch a little bit about this term of mentoring, because we've done quite a bit over here around kind of defining it and making it clear. And it can take sort of many forms, you see. And one of the things that we talk about, or a way we sort of differentiate a little bit behind sort of what's the difference between, say, a mentor and what you might call a coach developer. And the distinction we take is that a coach developer is somebody who is predominantly looking at an individual's coaching craft, their practice, I suppose, and helping them with, enhancing their ability to help another person on a learning journey, and devising learning environments for them so that they can explore different avenues to engage and to connect, and to also, devise practices, etc., etc. Whereas a mentor we would see as being much more about the individual, the person, and kind of their drivers and their motivations and their barriers and some of their psychological blockages. Are you kind of touching on both of those bases, or are you kind of staying more in the how to coach stuff?
You know me, Stu. I can't help but get too geeky and sometimes overwhelm myself. I'm actually touching on both. So what's interesting is it first started as this idea of I wanted to mentor coaches, but I wanted to create that mastermind experience. So I wanted to be one-on-one with them, but I also then wanted them to share with a fellow group of people going through it together, because I thought that's where real magic was. As you sit in a room full of coaches, some real magic happens when you shut up and let them talk. And then you just toss out a question, or you toss out a scenario and you let them riff on it. And so I wanted to do both. And then same thing, I started digging into what's the difference between mentor and coach developer, because we don't use the term coach developer as much in the US. So I kept saying, I had a tough time elevator pitching people. What do you do? Oh, cool. You do R.E.A.L.M things for parents at, youth sports organizations. Like, people couldn't, even my wife said, I don't know how to tell people what you do. Like, I see it and it's awesome, but how do I describe this? So I started just telling people I'm a coach developer, because that made sense. Like, I'm developing the next generation of coaches who are going to make an impact on the lives of the kids by giving them the tools, resources, and knowledge they need to create the very best learning environment. But at the same time, again, I wanted to sort of straddle that my wife is doing some work with an organization, and they're talking accountability with her. And I really like the fact that there's this one-on-one contact, somebody that's creating this ownership for them. Like, hey, you promised me to do this. Are you doing it? What else can I do to support you so that you get this done? And that's how we should be with our athletes, right? We coach a team, but then we refine it to the individual itself, that person. And we have to coach to that individual in front of us in that moment. And so I sort of wanted to straddle that too. And so I've revamped it, because it hasn't launched completely to the public. It's just stuff I'm doing, beta, and with these organizations I'm working with. I really want to go the direction of I'm one-on-one working with these people, mentoring them as human beings first, because that's how we should coach, as our children are human beings first, and then developing the coaching craft from my perspective. I'm not an expert in cricket. I'm not an expert in rugby. I'm not an expert and I'm not an expert in certain core competencies within the FA and U.S. Soccer and these other groups that license them. I don't want to touch that. I want to give them the other pieces of the puzzle that those organizations say, we do some, and we'll give you a base knowledge, and I'll go find those experts who can partner with you and give you deeper. And that's where I really want to play, in that social emotional learning space, psychology, the neuroscience behind language and excellence, the concept of developing excellence in children, and, all those pieces of the puzzle. That's where I really want to play. So like I said, Stu, I'm all over the board, because I just see this need there for our coaches to have that person that they turn to and say, I need to know more about this. Go find out, and let's have a session. Or can you build me a course?
And there's something perfect about that, in the sense that, in fact, I often think that not having particular technical knowledge of the sport itself is a positive. And part of the reason for that is it's a constraint. And as a result, you are then immediately in a different space as somebody connecting with somebody else who's trying to navigate some of these problems. And I always think that one of the one of the best questions that you can ask and also be asked by anybody with any is why do you do that? Or why do you do that way? And it's amazing how many times I get these blank stares. I don't know. we just do. And then we begin to explore it. And sometimes it's like, yeah, it's perfect. This is exactly how it should be. But other times it's like, yeah, that's actually a different way of looking at it. So, and I think it's a bit under recognized that. I think people assume to be a mentor that you have to be some sort of master coach in that domain. And I think coaches can get that kind of information from other coaches, whether they're so-called master coaches or just other peers, because everyone's got great ideas and you can learn things from each other. But that person who's prepared to just literally sit with somebody and just talk to them and explore and then kind of follow on the questions and kind of just follow where their story goes and kind of pick up on some of the bits of the story and, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way about that? That's a really interesting and powerful place to be.
Very much so. And it's like you look back on your own career and you knew what you knew, but sometimes you didn't know what you didn't know. And that's really the space we need to play in is getting coaches to understand what they don't know and helping them. And you're right. I'm not a master coach. And some of the best feedback I've ever gotten is when I'm working with organizations I know nothing about. U.S. Sailing. I grew up in landlocked Ohio. My experience with sailing was extremely limited. And I go in and work with him, and that was one of the best comments I ever got was this guy knew nothing about sailing, and that's what made his presentation so powerful is because it gave us a different perspective, but he still understood what we were going through at a core level. And so, and you're right, it's like, that is the best part is asking, well, why did you do that way? Or being able to bring in a particular expertise like, hey, you know your stuff. You're a brilliant coach, but you're coaching 8-year-old, and you do a great job. You're with 8-year-olds. What language are you using? Why did you use that word? Well, because this, and this. Well, did you know that, 8-year-old? You good, Stu?
I'm good. Right. Yeah. Sorry, I just lost a little bit for a second there. I'm not sure whether something's happening my end or whatever, but we'll persevere. Just a quick question on this, right? So something you said earlier on about how the coaches have different perspectives, around they've got the same challenges and the same issues, but obviously they're in different contexts. Like one might be in a high performance context, one might be in a grassroots context. I've always been a firm believer that there is this perception that it is harder and takes more skill to be a coach in a high performance context. I have always been the believer that actually it's not a question of degrees of skill. It's just the context is different and the demands are different. But the reality is actually the skill and the expertise required to engage with any human being with complex needs, they're very much the same. So, you're working with a group of children in a community context. Well, all you got to do is start to layer on a few extra little dynamics. Like let's for example say, a few of them have some learning difficulties or something along those lines. Well, now your engagement and your skill levels have just gone through the roof. And I often think that actually the high performance context, which is perceived to be actually those athletes are pretty self-motivated, not always, but, can be pretty self-motivated, pretty committed, fairly highly skilled. So actually the task is different, but I don't think the skill level's any different. And I'm interested in what your thoughts are about that whole world, really.
I think the grass is always greener on the other side. So yeah. I think that, one group is always going to look at the other and think you've got it easier than me. And I have to work my tail off. And it's just, but the perception is you're right. It just takes unique skill sets. And the best example I can give is because I saw it all the time is you'd go to a pro athlete or pro coaches camp, or you'd go to a college here in the U.S., a university coaches camp in the summer. And that coach didn't actually coach the athletes. All of their athletes or their assistant coaches, or they brought in experts and everything, they ran the camp. And that coach just showed up for pictures and FaceTime and everything like that. Not because they didn't want to, but because they knew their lane. And if you're, a national championship winning football coach and you're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, you may not be able to set the right learning environment, communicate properly, understand the skill acquisition process of 9-year-olds. So you leave it to somebody who does get that, and it's then their purview, it's their lane. And that's how I look at it, is you gain a certain set of skills and competencies, and knowledge themes around whatever level you're coaching, and you become very proficient at it. But then, even though they're very similar, when you step into that other place, when you go from high performance to grassroots, it changes. The psychological and athlete dynamics with you change. The social emotional space changes. The language you're using changes. You can use certain language with high performance athletes that just clicks with them. You use them with grassroots athletes, they need a different kind of language. Just like when I work with 5-year-olds, if I turn around and show up at my high school or college training session using similar language or similar visual cues, they're going to look at me like I'm nuts. So I think it really just depends on the skill sets and core competencies and how you structure them, so whether it's easy or hard.
Have you come across any resistance? Have you come across any challenges? What have been the kind of areas that you found it most difficult to overcome, perhaps? I know I've certainly had some of those experiences myself. Well,
when we rolled out the tool cards, the first thing we rolled them out for soccer shots, which is for ages 2 to 9. So it's very grassroots. And see, I love the foundational element. My belief is that just like some of the other countries have done, you should put some of your very best coaches with your youngest and least experienced players, because you're building that foundation. It's like, if you want your kids to be physicists, they have to learn the simple equations and formulas and algorithms before they can ever do advanced physics.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've got with our kids, is we need to give them those basic foundations: physical literacy, learning environment, the technical skills, all that stuff. So we need very, very, very well-trained people working with our younger kids. And that's why we need to pour more into our volunteer resources. And so I love working with that level. But when we created those cards, I then reached out to a bunch of governing bodies saying, hey, we got these cards. They got great traction with soccer shots. They really hit it home. And several of them pushed back and said they're a bit, for lack of a better term, childish for what we work with. They would work with our, like 7 to 12-year-olds, but they wouldn't work with our older ages. And I said, you're right. We talk about high fives change lives and making eye contact, and they got silly cartoons on the front of them. But the science on the backside came from Adlerian psychology, and it came from Rikers, and it came from, Maslow and Bloom. And I mean, we layered in heavy, there was it's scientifically supported, professionally proven work on the cards. And it was interesting because that pushback came back and said, all right, I'll do a different version of the cards. And then I was talking with a friend of mine at the United States Olympic Committee, and she said, don't redo the cards. She said, I would think that the pushback is, I challenge high performance coaches to look at these cards and adapt them to their environment. If you're as good a coach as you say you are, you could look at these cards and adapt their solutions to the athletes and environment in which you coach. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Mm-hmm. So you do get that pushback sometimes. And you get pushback from the grassroots coaches who say, well, it's nothing like that. I don't have the athlete buy-in. I don't have the athlete engagement. I don't have the parental support, or I don't this. And it's like, well, okay, you may not, but what are you doing? What are we doing to set that cultural tone? Because you have to remember, those athletes come to there because that's become a cultural tone for them. That's become a behavioral pattern. And so what are you doing to better engage and connect your kids so they are excited? And that's where the positive discipline cards can come in really well with some of the strategies we use. It doesn't matter if they're 3 years old, they're fully engaged when they show up at practice, just like a high performance athlete. They're just a very, very, very small child. And so they don't have the physical and intellectual capacities of maybe a 30-year-old, but they got all the other pieces of the puzzle at a very, growth stage.
So in that context, I suppose it's trying to get people to connect with the idea that it's not necessarily about the look and feel of something. It's about the message behind it and the impact that the message could have with any particular cohort. And it's about adapting the message to suit the audience that you're working with. Is that kind of a decent summary of that challenge there?
Spot on. I feel like coaches should be like water. Okay. We're constantly talking about how we pour into athletes, but we're not. We actually mix in with them and work together with them. And water adapts to the container it's in. You can put 8 ounces of water in a tall glass, and you can put 8 ounces of water in a flat bowl, and it's still water, but it takes the shape of that environment it's in. And that's, as coaches, that's when you are a really great coach, is when you're coaching high performance athletes and you take on the shape of what they need in that moment. Or you shift gears and you're working with grassroots players, and you're working with 4-year-olds, and you take on the shape of that container and you adapt your language, your behavioral patterns, your modeling. For instance, you wouldn't tell a group of 2-year-olds use the outside of your foot because the vast majority of them wouldn't quite understand that possibly language-wise. But you could say use your pinky toe, and that's the outside of your foot, and they get that. Tap the ball with your pinky toe, and they might get that. You wouldn't tell them, you wouldn't teach a complex move and say, you might call it a bug squisher. You might stand eye to eye with your 18-year-old athletes and address the crowd standing. But with 2-year-olds, if you stand above them, they're just staring at your shins. So you get down to eye level. And so it becomes you adapt to the container in which you coach.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? For me, is the that ability to sort of flex with the group that you're in front of, and the same applies in the mentoring or coach development role, because each learner we're in front of, and I feel like there are a lot of similarities. There are some differences, but a lot of similarities in terms of each person that we have in front of us, has a different set of needs, and being able to flex and adapt to those different needs, I think, is really important. I was doing a coach education course recently, and I've got a bit of a challenge with coach education, full stop, because I think historically, certainly, it's been very much done in a kind of traditional education model where there is content, and it is important for you to learn this content, coach, because you've come to this course and you know nothing, and we're going to give you all the information you need, and you will go away and be a better coach for it. And that's kind of been the sort of traditional coach education model. Everything's done on a course. There's usually an assessment at the end, and then you're deemed to be competent or not yet competent, and the assessment is often done in an artificial way, and all these sorts of things. There's lots and lots of challenges with it. But so I much prefer to work in a much more kind of organic, one-to-one basis, or sometimes in a kind of workshop, more informal learning setting where we can have a little bit more flexibility about the way we work. But I'm very fortunate that the GB Hockey, who I work for, and part-time outside of my day job, they've sort of shifted their coach education model, and they've put much more ownership on the course leader, I suppose, or the leader, to guide and learn it. So we were doing a course recently, and there's a series of kind of key outcomes, like learning outcomes, but you can kind of shape it the way you want to go. And I decided to flip it. So ordinarily, the way it would work is we would normally go in front of a group, and one of us would normally model some sessions activities that are in keeping with the theme, and we would and then we'd get some bit of Q&A with the coaches, and then afterwards, then they would then do some sessions later on. And I decided, no, I'm going to flip this, right, because I don't know anything about these people. And I want to be able to tailor my support to them based on what they're bringing. So the first thing I've got to do is watch them coach. I've got to give them a chance to show what they can do. And then I can then provide them with some observations and share with them some experience, some alternatives or different views or whatever it is. I can share with them some observations that they may not have seen for themselves or not be aware of. The peer group, I've got some valuable, fascinating, and amazing insights, and those the peer group can, who are sometimes acting as participants or as observers, can share or question or ask for clarification on particular approaches. So actually, in many ways, you can kind of almost sit back as a coach developer. You can hear what the peer group say, and then you can just fill in any blanks, right? And then those individuals go away with kind of like an individual learning and development plan. And then in the afternoon, I was then able to do this kind of modeled session, but it was based on the things that had emerged from the discussions and from the sessions that they'd done and all those sorts of things. So I was able to completely design my activities based on what they'd seen, what they'd observed, what I'd observed them doing, and the things I think they needed to be able to see, as opposed to what I thought they might need to see. And it's a very different environment. There's me and one other tutor, and there's 16 other people there. But that was an attempt, I think, to try and design the learning experience for them, with them, make it as individualized as I possibly could, given the constraints of time and everything else, and then try and design a learning environment that's going to enable them to try and get as much as they can out of the day. And by all accounts, they've not done it that way before. And my co-tutor said to me afterwards, I'm always going to do it that way going forward, because I think it's so much more powerful for them to have then been able to see when you're coaching, when I was coaching, to see the different ways that they coach, the ways that I coach, because they're picking up on the stuff that we discussed in the morning, and they've got a different frame of reference. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that story with you because it's particularly pertinent, because it happened fairly recently, and just get some just initial responses and see if that resonates with the stuff you're doing.
It does, and it's brilliant. It's the core of coaching. Is we tend to approach a training session with our athletes of, I know the answers and then you're going to do it my way and then I'm going to show you. And what we've realized is, no, we need to find out where they are, teach that athlete where he or she is along that development and learning timeline, and teach them in a way that they understand, not the way that I understand. So it's, I go back to that article that's Player Development Project has shared a bunch of times, that's not how I learned. I figured out my son doesn't learn math the way I do. So when I kept teaching him the way I had learned it and I could do it, it wasn't connecting. And so we should be training our coaches in the same fashion. And I'm with you. You touched on a few things that I struggle with. I don't have a problem with coach certification and licensing. I want to work with those organizations because it's like doing a sprint class in a graduate program. You only get a few weeks, so you feel like you get a touch on something and you feel good. But when you spend a whole year with your professor and in cohorts, that's where you really learn. Your professor gets up in front of the room and lectures, and then you go away with the tutors and with your cohort of teammates who work on projects together, and that's where the real learning takes place. Is you take what was lectured about and you then craft it and apply it and develop solutions. And coaching courses sometimes become very lecture oriented because they have a short period of time, and so, but there's not that, like you said, there's not that mentorship relationship. There's no use of video. I think it would be brilliant if a licensing organization said, hey, you're going for your A license, great, so 2 weeks out we want you to take a couple of videos of you coaching practices, and by the way, also coaching a game, and send it in ahead of time, and we'll evaluate it. And when we sit down, we're going to, we've got a curriculum, but we're going to tailor make the curriculum based on what we saw in your video and work together through that. Yeah. That kind of stuff. And then video afterwards. Send us a video in 6 weeks and let's evaluate where you've grown and developed, because it's coach development. If we're going to preach player development, we've got to preach coach development.
Yeah.
And the other piece was the professional practitioner. Stu, you're a professional at what you do. And you know where your strengths are, and you know what you bring to the table, and where you can help these people individually, each and every one of them, especially once you've figured out what each person needs specifically from you. And I don't have a problem with most certifying organizations saying, hey, we're now including sports psychology, and we're now including that, and we're now including that. And I go, that's great. I had somebody press back the other day about, well, what makes you different than what some of the governing bodies are doing in the U.S.? And they said they've got that in their courses. And I said, they do. And they said, they're more than bullet points. They actually have lectures about it. And I said, good. I said, is the lecturer a trained professional practitioner of that area? What do you mean? Well, you have to also worry about the person teaching the course if they truly deeply understand and have knowledge about that which they're talking. Because we're layering in these pieces of the puzzle, like physical literacy and nutrition and stuff like that. But when we can partner with trained professionals like you who say, I'm going to take them to a deeper level because that's what I'm trained professionally and that's what I practice in. It's like Dan Abrams. Are we reaching out to Dan Abrams and saying, hey, will you come alongside us and help mentor these coaches who are getting their badges, because we're using stuff that you talk about, but you're the trained professional? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a really mean or rough way to say it, but it's like, great, you've got that in your certification program. But neuroscientists don't go to dentists to learn the techniques. They go to fellow neuroscientists. So when you're teaching sports psychology, do you have a sports psychologist actually teaching the material?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference, isn't it? Is that what you're going to get from a certification or a coaching course is a snapshot, and it's most likely to be delivered by somebody who is a generalist. And I'd classify myself as that in general. I've learned a lot about my craft and all those sorts of things, but I'm still a generalist. I'm not a Dan Abrahams in psychology. I have a decent fundamental grasp of psychology, and I like to believe I've also got some decent practice and abilities to actually find ways of tapping into motivation or whatever it is, or arousal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm self-taught, so I would never classify myself as being somebody who is an expert, like somebody like Dan, for example. And so therefore, if somebody wants to get deep expertise in that, then that's the person they need to go to. And by nature, the people who do coaching courses, they have to be generalists because they have to be able to meet a lot of people's different needs. And it's very, very difficult to have a subject specialism. Plus, there's another important point about what you say there as well, is that people might go on a coaching course and say, yeah, I do all that. Why do I need to work with you? Well, the difference is that what you're going to do is you're going to say, yeah, but I'm going to help you take your knowledge that you've used and done a little bit of practice on, and I'm going to help you to refine your practice, taking that knowledge, the declarative knowledge, and turning it into procedural knowledge so that you become more effective. Because look, we as coaches, we need to practice. Yeah, we need to practice with feedback. So we get athletes all the time. They start, doing what they're doing, and if they need or want it, they've got the opportunity to engage with us to give them or provide them with, a viewpoint on ways in which they might be able to enhance their performance. Well, that's the same for us as coaches. There's ways in which I could enhance my performance. You come and watch me tomorrow, you'd be able to enhance my performance easily, because there's so many things that I don't know yet, so many things I'm unaware of, so many procedural things that I just haven't quite nailed down, things that I could refine, probably things I've forgotten, things that I need to connect with. It even happened on this course when I was doing the model session, we'd obviously given them quite a lot of feedback, so they were kind of tuned in, and I said, look, I want you to tell me the good and the bad. And one coach said to me, you weren't very engaging. You were a bit official and a bit professional. And I went, you know what? I absolutely was, because I was in like tutor mode. So I was being all kind of like, I'm the man. But in reality, I'm like, yeah, you're totally right. So then the next session I did, I'm like, right, I'm going to be engaging. You're going to see the engaging side of me as well. So that was brilliant feedback, stuff I wouldn't have spotted for myself, even though I know this stuff, but somebody made me aware of it. And I think that's the biggest thing, that somebody working with you in your scenario, in situ, alongside you with the problems that you're going to find, there's just no value. There's just no replacement for that.
Definitely. And it's funny because a lot of governing bodies are now seeing that. I've talked to a few who said, Ontario Soccer Association, I pitched my mentorship program to them. They said, we're working on something along to that too, because they saw the value in certifying their coaches with generalists and in giving the coaches the base technical skills they need, doing the lectures, doing the classroom. And then they saw this value in, okay, now let's get them in the lab. Let's put them with these people, like you said, that come alongside them in situ and learn with them alongside them. And that's where magic is. And let's utilize video, and let's do video feedback, and it's like, so I'm not knocking the certifications. I'm saying we should start reaching out to these other people who can dive a little bit deeper. And what makes you special, Stuart, is what you said, is this self-awareness of what you're good at, what you're pretty proficient at, and what you probably would say, I'm in deeper waters. And so when you're a mentor to somebody and they come to you with a question that's extremely deeply neuroscientific or psychological, so you can answer the vast majority of us with your skill set, because knowledge is not just learned in a classroom, it's learned in professional practice too. So having a degree is one thing, being able to apply it is another. It's the people like you that bridge that gap between the two that do very well.
Yeah.
But if there's something you don't know that you say that's deeper waters, you as a mentor can say, let's have a conversation with Dan. Let's dig into the science together. Let's reach out to so-and-so. He's the social or emotional learning expert. She's the athlete motivation expert. So let's talk to her about this. That's what makes it special in that mentorship program, is the connections you have to other resources to bring in. And that's why I named mine R.E.A.L.M. It's resources, it's expertise, it's accountability, it's learning, and it's mastery. And that doesn't mean it's coming from me. I'm just your conduit to create that for you alongside you and work with whatever you're doing in the search.
And often as well, it's I always describe the role as it's almost like being there's lots of terms I use to describe the role, but one of them is to hold a mirror up. Sometimes it's somebody just shining a mirror and going, oh yeah, I didn't see that. Or the other one is, and I love Andrew Gillett, who is a professional coach developer and an absolute font of knowledge. He's been on the podcast in the past. It's the one where I'm falling about with mirth and laughter, because he's also hilarious. But he said it's about being a light, a bridge, and what was the other one? A ladder. And that, I love that terminology. He also describes it as well as being a sense maker, helping people make sense of their lived experiences. Because that's the other thing I think that's very different about the kind of power of a mentoring offer is the fact that things will happen that are never going to happen in a sterile coaching course environment, because it's kind of designed not to throw up those challenges. There'll be completely things that are completely off the wall. I mean, I remember I went to mentor a coach. I was watching him in action. He's a great coach, right? He's got it down. practice design's fantastic. His questioning's amazing. His engagement levels are brilliant. He's got them all high five. He's got them all doing all sorts of crazy stuff beforehand. Really, really nice. I could have literally within 5 seconds, you just kind of know, this guy's got it, right? But then there was one moment, right, where he starts to get them together in a huddle, and they're doing this kind of bit of a debrief thing. And it goes on, and he's asking questions, and they're discussing, and it goes on. It's quite cold night. It's going on. And I'm thinking, okay, there's a little bit of that. And then that's fine. Maybe that's a one-off. Then he goes again. Then they have a huddle again. They do activity for like maybe 2-3 minutes, and they come back together, have a huddle again. It goes on. So I just got my camera out and just started filming it. It's like, it goes on for 5-6 minutes. And that happened 4 times in a session that lasted about an hour and a half. So afterwards, I sort of sat down with him, just great session, gave him all his feedback, brilliant stuff, and all that sort of stuff, asked him how it went, all that sort of thing. And then I said, just talk me through your huddles. What are they about, and what are you using those for? Yeah, I was doing quite a bit of questioning. I wanted to show you what I was doing. I was going, do you know how long they went for? So I put the video on for him and showed him, and he's like, oh my God, what's going on and on? I said, yeah, but they're really valuable, right? I guess there's lots of stuff there, but did you need 4 or 5 of those? Could you maybe have got that message across a little bit quicker? Back to the action, back in, back to the action, back in. And he's gone, never would have noticed, never would have seen that. And that's kind of sometimes the role, isn't it? You spot the things that you would never otherwise see happen.
Most definitely. And so just like our athletes come to the playing environment with their own perceptions and their perspectives, so do we. And we run our own video of what happened. And so I'll be like, I only stopped them for 30 seconds. And all the athletes were in front of me. And I projected my voice very well. And then you see the video and you go, oh, wow. What I perceived was not what happened. And you're right. Along with that, one of the most powerful moments I ever had was I did video analysis of a coach. And I actually muted the video at one point because I didn't need to hear what the coach was saying. Body language and positioning and everything like that was all I was looking at. I got geeky about it. And so my feedback he stopped the players 4 different times on the court, and multiple times half the players were behind him. And so he taught very well, but I don't know if all of them learned what he was teaching. So if there's a disconnect in the game later, that's where the disconnect is. It's not that you didn't teach it. It's that they didn't learn it. And I did it in a nice way, but I wrote my notes. Well, I got feedback back from the director that said, this guy's been coaching 20 some years, and said, that's the first time somebody's ever took a video and said, look where you're standing. He's now always making sure that the athletes are in a position that they can hear him, so they're all fully engaged in what he's saying. And he moves about the court in a way that he feels like he's more interactive with his athletes. 20-some-year veteran. And I'm thinking, I wish somebody would have done that for me,
Yeah, absolutely. That funnily enough, that happened to me. I'd never think about positioning, right? Never. I would never have even considered it, right? It's just like, I'm always thinking about other things, like, most of the time, because I'm working with constraints, I'm always thinking about, right, what's the new constraint I can throw in here? How can I add value to this? Or how can I take this to the next level? Or how can I tweak it a bit more just to kind of squeeze the juice out of it from a learning perspective? Never really think about positioning. And then when I was doing this modeling session, somebody picked up on it and said, why were you standing there? Why did you? And this is one of the candidates, so we're learning together. Perfect example, right? And I'm sat there, I go, why were you standing there? You sort of walked through the activities and you sort of stopped you one and you gave them a different task, then you moved on. Why there? Why didn't you put yourself over there? And I just went, you know what? I never gave that a second thought. I'm really mindful of it now. And I'm always thinking about where I need to stand, but it was like, it really, really kind of brought it back to me. It's like, almost like, it's like a basic, like a fundamental, how like in golf, like they always say, you've got to go back to the fundamentals sometimes because, everybody can lose sight of their fundamentals. A bit like that, really, I sort of thought, that's a little bit of a fundamental that I'd completely lost sight of.
Very much so. I just picture picture your interactions and all these other interactions that we're hearing about in these mentorship roles, like Socrates. What would it have been like to sit in his quote unquote classroom? Because he was very questioning the Socratic method. He was drawing the information out of his participants. They were probably pushing back on him as much as he was pushing back on them during these sessions, right? Mm. And it's just like, it is a learning journey. And that's the best part about being a mentor is they think that they're learning from us. No. We're learning together. We're drawing forth each other's knowledge. We're sitting alongside each other, learning and growing. And I rolled out a new activity for positive discipline for soccer shops. And I went up to the corporate, to the franchise and rolled out a workshop and a couple new activities that I'd worked on to their participants. And I come back and Jane, 40-year veteran, says, how did it go? And I said, oh man, you're going to laugh. In this one particular moment, I was teaching them that they needed to give ownership to the kids and make their kids feel like, it needed to be more about the children and less about us. So we're not going to tell them everything. We're going to ask more of them and everything. And I'm showing the difference between discouraging language and encouraging language. And the idea is that they'll hear one and they're like, yeah, I'm totally disengaging from you. I want nothing to do with you. And then I run through the scripts of the encouraging piece. And my hope is that they're like, oh, I really wanted to listen to what you had to say. And I wanted to be involved because I feel like you included me and like I belonged and all that stuff. I get done. And one participant raises their hand and says, they were good, but there was a lot of I language in there. So I was still wanting to, we talk about certain behaviors come from feelings. And she said, I was still thinking and feeling and deciding that I wanted to resist you and misbehave because it was all about you because you used a lot of I. And I was like, oh my goodness. I had to retool all the questions. And I came back and told Jane, I said, she hammered me in front of everybody. And I went, wow, that is awesome. And Jane looks over the questions. She goes, yeah, there are a lot of I statements. Let's fix those. And so it's a learning journey. We got better at rolling out our tool cards because somebody said, well, actually, it's not quite hitting the home run you think it is because it's still about you. It's I.
That's fascinating, isn't it? And is that something you wouldn't have spotted it until somebody pointed it out to you?
Nope. Because I thought it was pretty cool to be like, I'm so proud of how hard you're working. I'm so proud of the way you're paying attention. And they're like, yeah, it's not about you. It's about me. And so you should be very proud of it or whatever, but I can't remember the exact phrases, but there were a lot. I would really love it if you would blah, blah versus, pushing it on to them and giving them ownership. I never picked up on that because I wrote them. I had the perspective.
That reminds me of something you said to me on our first podcast conversation that has stuck with me, right? And I must say it, I don't know, every day, or at least maybe every other day or something like that with my kids, which is changing this idea of it being about you, right? So I am very proud of you, to you should be very proud of yourself. That was such an absolute nugget of gold from that thing. And that is, honestly, that's an amazingly powerful shift. And I remember my daughter recently doing something, I can't remember exactly what it was. She was, but I said, you must be really proud of yourself. And she just looked at me like this and went, yeah, of course I am. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. I love that.
That is the core. That is right there, the core of what Jane and I did with Positive Discipline, is this idea that we shift some of our language around so that these kids have full ownership. Because a lot of times the behaviors that we see on the field come from feelings, and we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of behavior. And then we punish the behavior, or we judge the child for the behavior, but we don't think about the fact that they might not have the social emotional capabilities yet to manage those behaviors without understanding what those feelings are. And children who feel detached, who feel burned out, who feel excluded, or who feel incompetent, like they can't accomplish a skill, when we start using I language with them, that's when they misbehave, because they don't feel any kind of control. And they're in a world that is completely controlled. Everybody tells them where to go, what to wear, what to eat. I mean, children have no control whatsoever. And so they will push back for that one spot where they think they can actually feel like they have some internal locus of control.
So let me see if I can't pull on this thread a little bit more, and see if I can't, without giving away all the secrets, but just pulling on some of these threads a bit more. You just said using I language. So if we're not using I language, and it might be useful to give an example of the I language, what would we be using instead?
We and you language. So I can't remember. I think it was Tom Bates who told the story. He was at Manchester United, and they had one of their higher level teams was playing against basically a team they should have beaten. It was a walk away game. And so they should have walked out there, wiped the field with the other team and been done with them. And they ended up losing. They just did not show up to play. And he said that the senior academy director came over after the game and said, I want to handle this conversation. And everybody fully expected the senior director just to light into these boys. You blew it tonight. You let us down. How could you show up like this? This is embarrassing for the program. Like, that's what we would expect.
Yeah.
And Tom said, I think it was Tom that told us, Tom said that this guy says, this coach comes over and says, we weren't ready tonight. We let you down because we did not have you prepared and you didn't show up to play. And because of that, we're all going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to figure this out. And all of a sudden, the whole ownership and the responsibility was all of a sudden on everyone. These players were fully bought into it because the mood shifted because one adult said, we and you. Not you let me down, or I did the best I could and you failed, or anything, but we didn't have you ready. We weren't there. We'll go back and do this together. And so that is one great example of shifting from that, the language to the athletes from the coaches. Instead of dropping knowledge on them, are we sitting alongside them and sharing knowledge with them? Are we including them in this learning instead of just always just giving them the answers and pouring into it? The other side of that is, like you said, is the I versus you. And I always look at it this way. Years and years and years ago at State Cup for soccer, I was with an organization that won quite a few state cups. And so all of our athletes are taking the podium after their games and everything. And one particular team, a coach kept going on and on about how much he had prepared them the season, how he coached that final game, and how it was so gratifying to see all the work he put in come to fruition. And I'm standing there with a parent of my kids, and the parent says, "Wow, look at the faces of his players. They were blank. Some of them, you could just see the expressions of, like, he just took away their moment." And it was a real, and he didn't mean it. It wasn't a bad guy. It just was, that's how we think. Wow, I did all this work. I mean, all the late nights and driving at 5 a.m. and, car full of stinky gear and all of this. But in that moment, that victory wasn't about that. It was about them. And so that parent basically said, when you get up on the podium, please don't do the same. And so I went up there and I took his advice. He was older than me and he was smarter. And I took his advice and said, these boys worked really hard and they should be very proud of themselves, because this is what they wanted. This is what they worked for. And you guys, I remember how I put it, but you guys had a heck of a run and you should be really proud. And push the moment right back onto them. If that parent had to come alongside me and said, we need to shift, basically what he was saying was, we need to shift that I language from I to you, right? Because that's their moment. Why would I take credit for what the athletes have accomplished?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because, like you say, I think I see quite a lot of the opposite in play often, where the lack of a sort of performance has often been associated with the athlete, and the success has been associated with the coach and the athlete. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic whenever I hear like a Premiership football manager starting to use that kind of narrative, I know they haven't got long in the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like you get these elite level athletes and then everybody starts talking about the fees paid to their grassroots clubs and stuff like that. How many grassroots coaches out there are saying, I was the very first person to work with that child, and I worked with that child for 4 years, and I infused the love and joy for the game and gave the technical foundation and the resilience and grit, all those other pieces. That kid would be able to bridge the gap between the good years and bad years and stay in the sport long enough to actually have some success. And one coach at the very end of their career took all the credit away from the rest of us. It's sort of like that. Oops, sorry. Many apologies. So it's sort of like that. It's really opened your eyes to, oh my gosh, I'm just a minor player in all this, but it's really about them. The other example that I can use is, and I can't remember who it was now, but after a NFL football game, the quarterback went to the podium and they lost badly, and it was a lot of interceptions, a lot of dropped balls, it was a passing game error. So you could really put the blame squarely on the quarterback. Or, like you hear sometimes, you could say, my receivers ran poor routes. My receivers didn't catch the easy catches. My blockers didn't give me enough time in the pocket. And, the play calling was atrocious tonight. And so, I'm a little upset with my teammates. Mm-hmm. Instead, that quarterback went to the podium and said, I just wasn't on tonight. I wasn't throwing crisp passes. I didn't hit you guys at the end of your routes. I didn't put you in situations to succeed. My blockers did such a great job of keeping me out of pressure, but I waited too long and hesitated in the pocket too much and got too many sacks. And so I take full blame for this. I'm sorry, you guys worked your tails off, and I'm sorry I let you down, but we're going to go back this week and we're going to fix it. Going into that practice that next Monday or whatever, how much more bought in are his teammates for him? How much harder are they going to work for a guy that says, I'm going to shoulder all the blame. I'll use the I language for the blame and the you language for the kudos, guys. You did a great job. I failed you. How much more bought in are they? That's a leader right there.
Yeah. One of the other, give me a little tidbit there in terms of a little snapshot as to, you made reference to the positive discipline tools, and I know it's an area that a lot of people listening to this, and there's quite a lot of the questions I get, or the kind of emails I get, is often people struggling with challenges like that. What other little nuggets have you got in the 52 cards?
Sure. So we talk about tone of voice. We have the 110-1 rule, which is the idea that yelling is yelling, and in a match with a large field with everybody else yelling and everything, most of the time the athletes don't even hear what you're saying; they just hear the yelling, and so it's a waste. And so you got 110 rule talks about it's body language and hand signals at 100 units, yards, feet, whatever. 10, it's short bursts of language that's for everybody. It's like social media. When you say something to athletes that are 10 yards away from you, everybody hears it, including the other team. So you might as well use it. That's language that's reminding them of something they worked on, and that's general. If you're going to put it on social media, everybody's going to read it, so you don't direct it at one athlete. So it's like hands up in the zone or move your feet, and you're just reminding everybody of something you worked on. And then at 1 foot, that's where those meaningful conversations can be had, because the athlete is sitting next to you and has the time to think, and you can use the game as an example. And you say, see how so-and-so's doing such that, or look at their defense now. What would you do? And so now you're actually teaching your athletes. But when they're out on the field, you got to use that 110. What else? We talk about high fives change lives, and that, greeting your athletes and creating that physical connection when they first arrive at your practice, and when they're having a bad moment, giving them a fist bump, maybe the one thing they need. Like, you don't need to say a word. They know that they've messed up. They know that the world just caved in on them, and their U10 PKs at their season championship game. Give them a fist bump and tell them you love watching them play, and that may be just enough to anchor them back. And encouragement versus praise. We talk about the use of praise versus encouragement, and how encouragement is better, because encouragement usually wraps around specific, easily repeatable behaviors and general behaviors that everybody can do, whereas praise usually attaches to something we consider that's almost innate, like, oh, you're so fast. Well, how can a kid be faster? How can they repeat that? How can other kids be fast? But if you say, oh, you work so hard to get back on defense, everybody else in the field can do that. And that kid can repeat that. And it's something very specific, and it's something that anybody can do. Anybody can work hard. So it's like changing from praise to that. It's we talk about I messages. We talk about, listening and perfection, and dealing with personal space and sarcasm, and then there's a bunch of conflict resolution cards in there. So the cards center around communication, conflict resolution, creating connection with your athletes, and developing a social emotional learning environment. And so they're all, and they all have the same. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you talk a little bit about, did you talk about humor, use of humor?
Yes, humor's in there. Okay. Actually, humor is really good. We had this cartoonist from Mexico do our cartoon. Brilliant artist. And so my two favorite drawings are the humor and Build or Belittle. The humor shows a guy in big clown shoes, the big floppy shoes, and he's got a squirting flower, and he's squirting somebody and saying, thank you, I'll be here all week. And we talk about how humor really does connect the brains. That's why, speechwriters say start every speech with a joke, because you're drawing your audience in. You're actually creating a connection at the visceral brain level. And then the Build or Belittle cartoon's my favorite, because it shows a coach screaming at an athlete, and the athlete is made up of a bunch of blocks, like bricks, and pieces are falling onto the ground. And it's just basically what, the quote is from Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong men. It's easier to build strong children than to repair a broken men.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, but yeah, humor is in there. Eye contact is in there. Anything we can do to create connection with athletes is big. And we also talk about the lizard brain. Like, when the child is in their lizard brain and they've gone, as they All Blacks would say, redhead. What good does it do for us to be redhead? Then we just got two lizards fighting. So we need to be the one that models that calm behavior. And what's really crazy is because this has been in the classroom for decades, my son's teacher must have studied it somewhere along the way, or he's just brilliant. His math teacher, my son can be a little bit energetic at times. He can be a little bit out of, and he's one of those kids that when he gets those feelings, they'll sometimes come out in these negative behaviors, like he'll talk too much, or he'll be a little disruptive in class. And he was. And his math teacher said, it's okay, I got it, it's okay. Well, one day my son and I were arguing over his homework, and he wasn't doing it. I said, well, buddy, he's not turning it in. I said, what are you doing? You're doing the homework and you're not turning it in. I was like, baking cookies and throwing them away. What are you doing, man? Work with me here, because this is your future, and I want to be here with you, but I got to understand where you're coming from. And I actually lost my temper. I went redhead, and I'm like, ah! And he puts his hands together as if he's praying, right at his chest, just underneath his chin. And he takes a deep breath, and he goes, I see that you're very upset, man. And I'm like, son of a gun. So I said, so I calmed down and I said, where'd you learn it? He says, my math teacher does that when I get a little too, when I get a little too crazy, and it really calms me down, Dad.
I love that. I love that. The reason I asked about the humor was because I was, it's just something that I kind of, I guess I lost sight of a little bit, really about that. Just sort of, maybe kind of delivering a message about a way that maybe even an individual or a group can enhance or focus on something or whatever it is in a humorous way. But obviously there's a message there that they want to connect with. I mean, I remember I was talking recently, we were talking about how we're doing cricket, and one of the things that happens quite a lot is cricket is one of those games, it can be a little bit slow sometimes, and so sometimes the players will just like lose focus a little bit, and they and then like all of a sudden something will happen, somebody pick the ball, they'll try and throw the ball to hit a run out, and if they miss, then there's like the batters are getting extra runs, and it's like, oh my god, what. And we had this game where you get an extra life. The batting player get an extra life if you have an overthrow. So it's like, oh my god, we don't give any overthrows away. So anyway, this one, sure as eggs is eggs. What happens is one of the players sort of got a bit of sleep, and all of a sudden, boom. So anyway, just stop. Let me just quick, just quick learning moment. Let's just come in. Everyone comes in. I go. So. Lucas here was having a lovely time, having a little dream about hitting the winning runs, getting his century and putting his bat up to the crowd, and he forgot to set his alarm clock, and because his alarm clock didn't go off, he didn't get in time to be able to get the ball to stop the overthrows, and now we've got an extra line, and all these kids are giggling away and laughing and all that sort of stuff, and I'm saying so, and so I said, right, so hit, and I had a kind of watch on my hand, on my wrist, took it off, said, right, yeah, I'm going to set the alarm for you, Lucas, for next time it comes, and then we'll get it going and all that sort of stuff. So we had a little bit of a joke, but we're kind of making the point for everybody that we've got to stay on the zone, we've got to stay focused in on that, but trying to do it in a kind of humorous and kind of like light-hearted way. And I just remember seeing it, and like afterwards, like just sort of seeing them all kind of a bit on it, and then like joking with each other about the alarm clock, and it's kind of nice that actually they now use that as a little bit of a reference point now. Okay, don't forget to set your alarm and all those sorts of things. And it's like you get these kind of unintended consequences, but it's obviously stuck with them because they were laughing about it, and it's created something funny, and then that's a source of humor, and that's something they can connect with each other on, as well as kind of taking on board the message I was trying to send.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. There's research out there that shows that messages that are wrapped in humor tend to be enter long-term memory much more easily, that they're more easily recallable over a longer period of time. And think about it. How many of your athletes will come back 20 years later and say, Coach, I forgot to set my alarm clock, and make a joke about it. Mm. And like this, the New Zealand All Blacks and other organizations that talk about strong cultures, they talk about shared language and shared vision and rituals, and that shared language becomes those inside jokes where they're sitting at dinner before a game joking about setting alarm clocks, and nobody else gets it, but they get it, and they remember why.
And it's interesting, the research, it also works the other way as well, doesn't it? I mean, anything that creates an emotional connection is far more powerful in terms of having, as something that will stay with you. Emotional experiences are usually very, very vividly remembered. And so whether those emotional experiences are a positive emotion through, for example, laughter and humor, or a negative emotion through, kind of fear, pain, or whatever it might be, they can be very long lasting. And I remember, one of your central messages has always been like, kind of echoes beyond the game, and being very mindful and careful of the messages that we're going to share with young people, because we don't always appreciate how much that's going to stick with them and the effect that can have on a long-term basis.
Yeah. And the sad part is we don't get to choose what they remember, but we do get to choose how we deliver it so that they remember it positively. And the brain is an Eeyore. The brain can be really like a mopey Eeyore, everything's negative. They will go to the negative stuff first. And that's why the research says to undo negative things, you have to have 5 positive, or you have to have 7 messages before you actually understand them. It's because the brain will glom onto that negative emotion. And so, humor is a good way to sort of default against it and create those positive memories. And you just don't know what it is that you are going to say that's going to stick with the child for life. So why not just make sure that everything you're saying is giving them is having a positive impact?
So in terms of like the I guess the next big, the next big phase, I suppose, in the in the kind of Maltbie project, in the Coach Reed project. What do you see coming on the horizon? And in fact, actually, I'll ask you a slightly different question. What do you see coming as, if we're going to kind of gaze forward into, the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, I feel like the world of coaching has changed dramatically in 5 years. It's changed dramatically in 2, in the sense of now the, kind of available resources, the conversations, the vibrant, sometimes debate, and sometimes the vibrant and violent, sometimes not violent physically, but certainly violent verbally, discussions sometimes about approaches and ways and all those sorts of things. This is something that I haven't known in my coaching career. I've never known that we would have such a sort of vibrant community of practitioners prepared to share experiences, share ideas, and all that sort of stuff. There's this fantastic, kind of community. But so that's brilliant, and that's been for me a really welcome development. I'm interested what you think maybe is the kind of the next stage, the next phase for the coaching world. What do you see coming over the hill for us?
I really hope that what I'm working with, especially U.S. Sailing with, becomes more of a reality. That our hope is over the next 3 years, we roll something out that becomes like the common practice of having these organizations partnering with people who are providing this deep one-on-one and mastermind sort of oriented mentor program to them. That's where my passion is. I love traveling out and working with large groups and doing workshops, and through Positive Discipline, I will continue to do. Anytime anybody calls for me to come out and give a talk, I'll come out and do the lecture. But where I really want to be is I want to be sitting side by side with small groups of coaches and one-on-one as a personal coaching development or coaching mentor, helping people. I used to always say, my parents did an amazing job raising me. And so my goal is to take the good things they did and capitalize and make them better, and take the things that maybe that they didn't quite do as well as they wanted to and improve upon it for the next generation. And that's what I hope for coaches. And so that's where I hope coaching going, is that these organizations get really savvy and say, yes, now we've got this 4-part, 8-week training program or 2-year-long certification, all of that and everything. But now we're also partnering with these mentors who are, like you said, getting out there and modeling the behaviors and tutoring the coaches, because coaching coaches is different from coaching players. And I think a lot of times when we structure our training of coaches and we evaluate our coaches, we evaluate how they're coaching the players, not how they are coaching. That makes sense. We usually talk about what they're coaching instead of, and who they're coaching, instead of the why, the how, and all that. And that's where I hope we go, is that you see this model of these governing bodies employing experts around the world and people who are passionate about helping coaches grow one-on-one and in small groups. That's going to be a big shift, because you can't run them through like a cattle call. But if you really want what's best for the next generation, then we have to treat ourselves like professionals. And in every other professional industry, there are mentors. There's video feedback. There's third-party work being done by experts who are coming in and lending their trained professional practice to it. There's accountability and ownership in it. And so if we want to be professionals as coaches, we've got to go that direction.
That's definitely I suppose I absolutely share that vision. And I mean, we're definitely seeing it happen over here, in terms of that, the emphasis being placed much more on that aspect of kind of the people development scenario, and much more people beginning to recognize that, like you say, the kind of the mass produced, factory farmed approach to coach learning and development, whilst it kind of looks good on paper, and it and you can create all sorts of metrics to show that you've got this number of participants through, or this number of learners through, and you've delivered, and they've and this and that. I mean, it's the strangest thing, right? I've got governing bodies who will very proudly say we have delivered this number of courses to this number of learners, and it's in the thousands, and the pass rate is in the 90s, and I'm like, that for me is every metric that works against quality. So you've gone for mass volume, so quality must be sacrificed by doing that, and you've also decided that you're going to rate yourself by the pass rate. For me, quality, there should be a much lower pass rate, because it can't be easy. Otherwise, you're devaluing the actual, you're devaluing the kind of the difficulty of the task. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think you want to make it too hard because you want more people to engage in your workforce. You want more people to be coaching out there and enjoying it and all those sorts of things. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that you can't tell me that 95% of the people who've attended your kind of initial coach education and training course are good enough to start from scratch because your learning program's that good. It just defies logic that would be possible unless you've made it so easy that it's not worth anything, or you're kind of fudging the figures. So yeah. I see a shift away from the mentality around mechanized approaches to human learning, and certainly in the coaching context, as we move towards an increased sort of professionalization, I suppose, towards, like you say, a much greater understanding that if we're going to help people with these complex tasks, which is human to human interaction, then we need to provide a different kind of support that is much, much more individualized. Now, the biggest challenge with any of this is how do you do that at scale? That's where technology comes in now. It gives us so much more scope and so much more opportunity to engage and reach. And we've got far more content that we can drive people to. You quite often you say, oh yeah, I'll say to somebody, oh, I know such and such. There's a great podcast. You can go and go and find that podcast. Or there's a book over there. You can go and pick that up. There's so much content available to people now that it's, that there's no real excuse not to be on that learning journey. And all I now need to do is to signpost to that, but also, kind of help that individual to sort of guide them on there. And I definitely see that. Well, that's definitely what we're working towards anyway. This is the kind of the strategic direction that we're trying to move towards, just recognizing this. And we're going to solve some of the problems on the way. I've never said that from the outset that, we have all the answers to any of this. I said, look, we're going to have to solve these problems as we go, because some of these things we've never really challenged us before, but they shouldn't be reasons for us not to start.
Yeah, I completely agree. And your vision is exactly what I see. It's not, like you said, it's not that it doesn't have to be hard. It has to be rigorous. To become a teacher, I spent hundreds of hours in classrooms with different experts across multiple subjects and topics, covering anything from ethics to phonics to, learning behaviors to psychology, and then the actual teaching science, And then I was in a classroom and placed as an intern working under a mentor teacher. And then I had a mentor when I was placed in my school, and the learning never stopped, and it just needs to be rigorous. And like you said, that really for me is the great equalizer, is the technology. The technology, and Think Tank was my proof. It's like I was working with an organization and they said, this is awesome. We'd love to roll it out to as many people as possible, but how do we do this, Reed? And I said, well, you saw what I did with Think Tank. And they went, oh. I said, yes. Technology is the great equalizer for us. So now what we need to make sure is that it's science supported or professionally proven, that it's sustainable. And so I don't want to come in and just do one lecture or do one workshop. I want to partner with your organization and work with you long term over a year or two or three, because that creates sustainability, real learned behaviors, right? And it's got to be solution focused. And that, like you said, that the technology gives us that ability. My daughter called us the other day. She FaceTimed us. And I was like, why are you FaceTiming? She goes, because I want to have a meaningful conversation. She's 2,000 miles away in Ohio because she just moved back there. And yet to her, FaceTime is a meaningful conversation. Well, shoot, if that's the case, I don't need to be in your town and pay thousands of dollars to come to your facility and sit face to face with you. We can jump on a Zoom call and you and I are face to face, and we can still read the emotions. Yeah, there's a little bit lost in not being in person. But how many more coaches, especially volunteer grassroots coaches, can we reach if we leverage video technology and distance technology and make it our friend, like you said?
It's like my, like you say, you have a mastermind group. I've got a mastermind group that, I lovingly call the Conclave, grandiosely titled the Conclave. And, and that, that's just groups of people who we just get together in a Zoom, and, we kind of just sort of talk to each other a little bit about kind of the things that are on our minds, the things that are challenge us, and then we kind of co-create some solutions, and we use like the wisdom of crowds, and I just try and kind of guide the conversation in a certain way. One of the guys actually based over in the States, football coach working in a school, and he ended up winning his I think his state championship or something along those lines. Never done that before, and he was kind of nominated as, or I think he won an award as Coach of the Year. It's interesting. He was saying, you win a league, you never won something. I haven't really done anything different, but we win something, and all of a sudden we're Coach of the Year. But anyway, he said, he said, he's going through this learning journey, and he's like really kind of struggling with some of the challenging concepts that we explore in the podcast and all those sorts of things. And he's decided to commit and to kind of really go through the learning process. I'm not saying that any of the stuff we've talked about has necessarily made any difference to mean that he could like win some sort of a league, but I like to think it might have made just a small contribution that might have just helped out a little bit. But the fact that we're able to do that now, with people all over the world, it's fascinating to me. People arrive in and they go, "Oh, great to see you. I haven't seen you for a couple of months. Here you are. You got somebody in New Zealand, you got somebody in Australia, you got somebody in New Hampshire, you've got somebody in Scotland, you got somebody in Italy." And it's just amazing that we can actually do this now, and the vast array of experiences. It's so fascinating. So yeah, I just think it's such an exciting time to be in this space, to be honest.
I'm with you. I just signed on with NYFA out of Sweden to be one of their mentors, and with player development or one of their stateside representatives in player development project as a mentor. And it's like, holy cow, is Sweden, Switzerland, or New Zealand, and I think one of them is in Australia. I think Dave, and then you got Lara Mossman and the rest are in UK. Mm-hmm. I have that at my fingertips. Yeah. The ability to jump on a call. Granted, so it's a really time difference, but to jump on a call and talk to some New Zealand and learn from them, it's so cool.
I know, it's fascinating. Hey, listen, I've used up enough of your time, and I have a little girl just about to come back from her brownies group. Where they've actually been on their first kind of like mini camp. So they've been out in the woods. She's going to come back and she's going to be probably covered from head to toe in mud and grass, but I bet she's had a wonderful time. And so I better jump off. But just wanted to have a quick, just, I guess, you've got a lot going on. You like you said, you've got all the various things going on. If people want to either get in touch or, kind of stay in touch, I suppose, and stay trying to hold on to, with all the various different projects that you've got going on, find out more, how do they get in touch?
Easiest way is Reed at Coach Reed is my email.com. Mm-hmm. You can find me at coachreed.com. Mm-hmm. And Reed is spelled R-E-E-D. Yeah. And Coach Reed will take you to all the other things I'm doing. It'll take you to Positive Discipline, PDF Play. It'll take you to the R.E.A.L.M, my mentorship program. It'll take you to Think Tank information. And I'm very active on Twitter and Instagram, and that's at Coach_Reed. And Stu, as you know, I try very hard to interact because I feel like I once had a professor say that he was in Buddhism, and he said, you just don't know if the next thing on the elevator is the Buddha, because he will walk among us, quote unquote. And he's like, so you always just say, are you the Buddha? And I jokingly, that's how I look at it, as the next person I talk to could be the person that gives me the one piece of information that completely changes my life. So I'll chat with anybody.
And that's definitely true. You were very gracious in responding to my strange requests to have a conversation. And like you said, it's been great to be able to sort of maintain the dialogue ever since. And we, like you say, from time to time, we'll just pick up on Twitter, a little DM or something like that, and then away we go again. So, hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we were able to reconnect. I know you've got loads of projects coming on, including the completion of a book in due course, and it may well be that we have a further conversation about that, because by the sounds of things, it's a very exciting project in itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I sent it out to a couple of people who are language geeks, because it's about the language of excellence and what words we use in peak performance situations that either inhibit or prohibit it. And I got good feedback. I had one guy who said, I'm using all your words in my training sessions now. So we'll see. You know me, I've been threatening for 4 years now to publish a book. So.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to that coming out, and I'll be fascinated to hear more about it. In the meantime, I hope things all go well. I'm looking forward to the next Go Chase Excellence Summit, because I know you've got plans for another one of those. Definitely worth keeping hold of that, because I played a small role in those, and I was able to catch some of the sessions, not all of them. There was just so many; it was unbelievable. I couldn't keep pace. But yeah, I'm looking forward to everything that you're doing, and all the best with it all.
Stuart, thank you so much. As I said, it's such an honor to still be chatting with you, because you're doing so much good and your meteoric rise to success with the podcast in such a short period of time is really cool. So thank you for all I've learned, for teaching me all that you've taught me over the years listening to your podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. So much in that conversation, and I love the fact that we just started to go and explore and discover and just discuss these areas that we're working in. I mean, there's loads. I mean, Reed's a font of all knowledge. He really is. He's full of insight. I love the idea of the 100, 10 and 1 rule. That really came through for me, and that's something I think I'm going to really focus in on, actually, and give myself a little bit of focus. I like the idea of the we language. It's something that I'm very mindful of, but it's something I can remind myself about, because you always can reconnect with that. And then I love the idea, he talks about the R.E.A.L.M, research, expertise, accountability, learning and mastery. He calls his approach and his program the R.E.A.L.M. I like that idea. We're in the coaching realm. It's a really nice way of thinking about what we do and the way we approach things. So that was great. I mentioned in the podcast towards the end there about the conclave. There are some spaces available. Some people have decided that their time has come to move on, and so there's a few spots available. And I'm also exploring the idea of doing a breakfast club as well. So if people are up for that, then I can look at how we might be able to put that one together as well. So if you want to get on board and you want to join in, just head over to the website, see the patron button on the homepage, and say become a patron, and you'll see the conclave option, join in, and it'd be great to have you on board. If you can't get on board as a conclave member, then hey, it's fine, no problem. There's other opportunities as well, but otherwise just carry on listening and share me your ideas and thoughts. If you want to go over to iTunes and leave me a review, or on any of the other podcatchers that you use, that would be really welcome, because that helps other people to find the podcast and grow the community. In the meantime, have a great week of coaching, and remember, Coens, not cones.